There has been also difficult moments where I've even been bullied for being from Italy, and I've received denigratory comments, and people even accuse me of being too friendly just because I was open, and so that can go both ways, right? But it's important that you know the truth, you know who you are, you should definitely stand by it and use that to your advantage and say, okay, I am like this, I have this power, and that's how I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it to my advantage.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Decoding Diaspora Podcast, a podcast in which we talk about the aspirations and everyday challenges of expats, migrants, and the diaspora, and how they find the resilience to overcome them. Well, if you have been an expat, a migrant, or an international, no matter how you identify yourself, you might have found yourself in a situation where you have just landed in a new country, or you are a fresh graduate and you desperately need to find work. You need to find work not just because of economic constraints, but also because of demands of visa and residence permits. So what do you do in this situation where you really need to find work and you may not speak the national language of the country you find yourself in, and you might not even have the support network that you may have had in your home country? It can be a little uphill to find work in these circumstances. And in these moments of desperation, we literally take up any work we get. We just grab into the next best opportunity that is available to us. And inevitably, we end up in roles, jobs, and industries that happen to us by chance, not through very much thinking or intention or by choice. And then you have this little voice inside of you after years of working in this career of chance where you think, hey, I did not really aspire to be in this profession. I never dreamt of being in this role when I was little. And how do I go and live out my dream, pursue my calling? How do I go from this career of chance to a career of choice? Our guest today has done exactly that. She has made the transition from being in roles and in industries which happened to her by chance, but then she took charge of her life, made some very intentional, concrete choices to build a career that she's truly happy about today. Our guest today is career strategy coach Valeria Kadelski. In her own words, she helps ambitious millennial expats to make the next bold step in their career and build a career that lights them up. Well, I want to be lit up, and I want others who are in my audience to also feel happy about what they are doing. So no wonder I am so happy to be in conversation today with Valeria Kadelski, and I hope we will all be a little wiser from Valeria's experiences of living as an international and building a career of her own choice, because as a career strategy coach, she's full of good ideas. Can't wait any longer. Let's dig in. Welcome, Valeria.
Thank you very much, Surabhi. What a wonderful introduction. Really, I wish I could be introduced like that in every single thing that I do. I may call you and use you as my official introducer. So thank you. I'm very happy to be here today speaking to you.
Great to hear, Valeria. The joy is all mine because I have been reading your work and reading about your work online, which definitely caught my attention. And I think what you have been doing with your life, your professional life, is super bold and very inspiring. So no wonder you are here in conversation with me today to inspire us all. Valeria, we have so much to pack in this conversation, in this podcast. So let me start at the very beginning. What brought you to Denmark, and where are you originally from?
Yes, of course. So I'm originally from Italy. I was born and raised in Viareggio. It's a small town on the coast of Tuscany. But my father is Polish, so that's why my surname doesn't sound very Italian. And that's why I've always truly felt like an international more than Italian. I came to Denmark 10 years ago now, which seems crazy how fast time goes. And I came here for my studies. The way that I ended up here is a little bit by chance, as you also already mentioned in work. So it happens in life, because I was studying in Milan already back then. I was already out of my, let's say, hometown for 3 years. And I was looking for my next step and looking really at what to do for additional education to do my master's. And I have to be honest with you, back then I didn't know where Copenhagen or Denmark really was and what that was about. But my university, my bachelor university, had a program with a degree that was very similar to what I had done before. And so that caught my attention at CBS, and I was like, but I kind of need to go and see for myself what the country is about, because again, I knew nothing. So I asked my childhood friend, I was like, hey, do you want to come for a weekend to Copenhagen in April and just, check out the university? And she was like, yeah, sure, let's go. And it was like typical Copenhagen April with like rain and super cold. I remember wearing like a coat and coming from Italy, freezing with wind and everything. And I just completely fell in love with the city, saw all these people biking everywhere and feeling this place is incredible, and there's so many parks and there's water and people feeling so like, I don't know, the vibe was just joyful and calm. And I thought, I need to come live here. So if that's the master, that's my entry to live here, that's going to be it. Because I have to experience life here. Like, this seems like my dream come true. And so I applied to the master's, and thankfully I got in. And that's how my expat journey started here in Denmark. Yeah.
Wow. Even a cold, rainy April month of Copenhagen was inviting enough, and you felt connected to this place.
Yes.
So after having graduated with your master's degree, you mentioned that you wanted to find work, and you did find work. How did that initial phase of graduation and then finding work pan out for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it was definitely not easy. I spent, 2 years in what I call like the university bubble in a way, because, I immigrated here as part of an international community that I naturally found at the university with a lot of Italians as well. So it felt like a gradual transition in a way for me. But then all of a sudden, when we graduated or started graduating, people started leaving the country as well. And I realized that I hadn't made that many connections as I wanted to, like locally or like with people that stayed. And that had, a big impact on me finding a job, because then, of course, all of a sudden I didn't have a lot of people to rely on. And I was quite new in terms of really finding a full-time job. I, of course, had done internships and, like those temporary jobs that I think every single international or just students go through while studying here. But finding a full-time position was a whole other thing. So it took me 7 months to get employed in my first full-time role. And while I studied management for creative industries, and that's kind of the area that I wanted to stay in, I ended up taking a job in tech sales. So again, very much to your introduction, I took a job that I had never thought I would get into, but because they were looking for an Italian speaker, and I had a friend who I'm still friends with, who introduced me to the manager, and she was already working there. That's how I got my first job. So basically through connection and language requirements. So yeah, so that took a while, and it was definitely a bit of a roller coaster, but eventually I got in through that.
Well, some might say that 7 months is actually not very long, and you have been really lucky to even find work right after graduation, and you capitalized and doubled down on your existing strengths, which was your mother tongue, which was Italian, which is great to hear. And then you ended up in tech sales, which is not entirely management of creative businesses. How did that feel? And what has been the journey like in working in a new industry, working in a new country, building your community of friends? I fully understand that friends came and went. I lost so many friends whom I met from different parts of the world, because we were all in an international program at university. So I fully shared that experience, how hard it is to constantly build friendships and relationships and having to say goodbye. But now that you find yourself in a new role that you hadn't really planned on, and have to create a new community. How did that pan out?
Yeah. So for me, I think like at the very beginning, I had to come to terms internally with the fact that I was getting into a completely new industry, that's not what I necessarily wanted to. And I mean, it was just about accepting that would have been anyway learning curve and something to be excited for, rather than feeling like if it was kind of a failure in a way, because it's easy to slip into that mindset of, oh, that's what I wanted and that's not what I'm doing, because actually that allowed me to be open enough to make incredible friendships on the workplace, that some of the people that I met at that first job are who I call my best friends here in Denmark today. I can also say that that's the place where I even met my Danish husband. So, I mean, I think that's a win for sure. But obviously it came with, with a completely new environment and a new job. And to be honest, that was my first real, work experience really, where I had the feeling that, of course, that I had to show up for something, like I had to perform as well and to, show them that I was capable of doing what they hired me to do. And that can be thrilling, but also be terrifying. So there was a lot of first things for me. And I had incredible coworkers, and both internationals and Danish, that really helped me build that work ethic that then I took with me for the years after, from literally simple things like, how do you, what's the etiquette of scheduling meetings with your colleague? Like, how do you manage calendars? Or like, what's, how do you talk to customers in a way that you can build relationships? And these are all things that were definitely helpful for me later on in all the other jobs that I've done, and that I still take. Yeah, they are still very valuable for me today. So I never thought that I would become so knowledgeable about such technical topics, because before getting this job, I've always considered myself a very more like creative and sort of person that is interested in like, literature and like music and art, and then zero technical things at all. So I thought, I honestly don't know how I'm going to work with hardware and software, but it was incredible. Honestly, I learned so much about internet and like Wi-Fi connections and all kinds of wireless streaming things that I would have never thought that I could learn. And that was also a very good exercise for me to learn that I could do really whatever I put my mind to, and I could literally learn anything that I wanted, which is an empowering feeling to have, because if you don't try it, you don't really know. So that was definitely a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I love the fact that you say that so many good things came out of this occupation, which you completely landed in out of chance, because you spoke the language and they needed someone and you needed a work. And so many big wins, like you say, you found your spouse at this first job, you found your best set of friends there, and you surprised yourself because you learned about a completely new industry that you had never thought you would do. So there was also a lot of, self-belief and growth that happened in that first job. Were there moments of discontent?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, especially towards the end of my employment, I had started feeling the burden of the high pace of the industry, because especially I think a lot of us internationals, but especially in first time jobs, we really want to show that we can do it. And we really want to show that we're worth the investment, that we're worth that trust that we're given. And so we tend to give 150% from the very beginning, right? And of course, if you give 150% from the very beginning, that kind of energy at some point starts to deplete, right? It starts to take its toll on other ways. And I think that I was so mentally and emotionally engaged in my job that it was also something that, again, it was not, it played in some of my strengths in terms of that I was working with people, and that's something that I've always loved to do, but it still was in an industry and an environment that wasn't really in my chords, right? So obviously that takes effort, that takes a lot of mental energy. And it also means that towards the end of it, I started to approach a stage of almost burnout because I just didn't have any energies anymore. And in the process, I kind of lost a little bit what is that made me happy about work. So, that is something that I learned through living it. And then afterwards, it was again helpful because I could recognize some signs, but it came a bit as a surprise when that happened the first time.
Yeah. What did you do
sure.
when you are pushing yourself, and really it is very demanding, borderline draining to apply yourself in an industry that doesn't come to you naturally, or it was an acquired taste. What did you do? Who did you speak to? What was your first step to handle this moment of little bit of a crisis?
Yeah. So back then, really, I didn't have a lot of tools that I felt like I could use because it was still my first employment. And so I relied a lot on my friends. I relied a lot on the people around me to seek out support in a way that, I could feel less alone in my struggles because, I wasn't the only one, of course, living that, right? So there was a lot of financial issues going on around. And then, as a matter of fact, COVID came. So while I was trying to understand what my next step would be, and also trying to see if I could get an exit out of the company to do something else, COVID came. So actually the last, I would say 6-8 months of my employment there were extra hard because, being in sales, I was responsible for Southern Europe. Can you imagine? Southern Europe was the epicenter of COVID at the time, and being far from family, it was a lot to take on mentally. So it happened that I got laid off. And at first I felt like a bit lost in a way of who am I? Because now I'm not that thing anymore. I'm not that person anymore that I've invested so much time and so much energy into. But also I felt a bit relieved because then the decision was made for me and I didn't have to take that into account. And so it was an interesting part of my life and an interesting process. And that's really the first time that I took really the time and the reflection to think about my next step. Because I was like, okay, now you don't have a choice. You have to think about what is your next step. And so, that was like a blessing in disguise almost, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah. And these moments of disruption is really where new ventures begin, where really it leads to creativity. I fully get it. And I'm sure a lot of people around the world are confronted increasingly with these moments of disruption in their career where the choice has already been made. But then the big question is, what do we do with it? And how did the realization dawn on you? I'm assuming that you somehow landed at the decision that you wanted to help others and be a career coach. Or did you entertain other possibilities? How did you land up doing what you do now?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be very honest. The process was way longer than that, because at that stage, for me, it wasn't clear exactly that I wanted to be a career coach because I wasn't even sure what career coach meant. So actually at that stage of my career, I just knew that I wanted to still work with people, but I wanted to work with people in a way of providing value and providing, assistance in terms of making people successful. And that is kind of like the underlying motive of what I do today. I thrive of seeing people successful and doing what they need to do. More than myself doing the thing. I've always been someone that thrives off other people's success. And so for me, then and there, the most logical choice for me was to actually pivot in customer success, because I thought, okay, I have the sales experience, but I want more like human and like relational type of contact with people. So for me, that made sense. And it actually pivoted into an industry. And then I changed a couple of companies and in different industries, still in tech, but different industries per se. Until this calling of, and that's where the career coaching came, is like this calling of really working with people to help people go through things that I had gone through, but in a much less painful way and much faster and more efficient. That's how it came about. That came at a place where I'd been building up a career in customer success, and then eventually I felt like I needed to have more direct impact on people around me. So I was like, okay, I want to work with internal teams, and I want to work with internal teams to make their job easier. And I want them to be successful and see the results like directly. I've already at that point been involving myself in career development activities and people and culture initiatives, like on a volunteering basis, because I felt that there was a piece missing where it's not about the performance. It's not about, the goals we need to achieve. It's literally about the person and like the complexity of what that means to advance and build a career, and just navigating all of those, again, doubts and emotions and uncertainties that the industry was bringing and the world is bringing, until I basically had a friend that did a coaching course. And although I've always been interested in psychology, I didn't really know a lot about coaching. And I was like, what is it? What do you do? And I thought, oh my God, this is literally what I've always been doing indirectly and I've always wanted to do. And so that's basically when I took the decision to make an agreement with my company so that I could, go off on my own and start this journey that I have been now for a little bit more than a year. Yeah.
That sounds so well that you really took, it was like you were listening to the signs that the universe was providing you, right? And you saw a lot of resonance between what you were already doing and what you would truly want to do to bring joy. And how beautifully put that what brings you really joy is helping other people and see them thriving and happy in what they are doing. Now that you've gone independent, it's been a little over a year. How has that journey been? And if somebody was to go independent and take that bold move of coming out of their comfortable, secure day jobs where they have the economic security, but perhaps not the fulfillment, what should they do? And what did you do? How was that journey of going independent?
Yeah, that is a very good question, because I can tell you, of course, what I did, but I think that for everyone is different. And the way that I also work with my clients is like, I have a lot of clients that are doing similar moves from going from full employment to maybe freelancing work or independent work. And for everyone looks a little bit different, because of course it depends very much on where you start from and all of the things that are surrounding that choice, that are not just financial choices, but it's also like your family situation and the country you're in, and what is the job that you're having now and what is the job that you're going into. There's a lot to consider, right? But certainly for me, one thing is important to say is that I think a lot of people, and I mean, some of my clients do, at least before we start working together, is they think that the cut needs to be extremely, direct and definitive, meaning, oh, you just quit your job and then you start doing something else. And some people do, and some people did, but it's not, there's always more behind it, meaning they probably had savings and they had been planning for being able to do that at some point in their life, should they need to. Or some people make a plan to maybe reduce their work time to part-time, and then they start doing freelancing work to build their business on the side. And for me, specifically, I was in a situation where I'd been in the company for a while and I simply didn't see myself growing anymore, and I didn't see the impact that I wanted in my work anymore. And I was very honest and open with my manager at the time. She was pretty new as well, so she didn't really know me as much or knew my work. And I saw that as an opportunity to be honest and be open and really ask for what I needed. So I went to her and I was like, look, do you see the direction that I want to take possible in the company, or like where I am? And if not, what are the options? What are our options? And, after that conversation, she was like, well, you can either, go into this other team, but it was unsure whether they actually had the space for me, or you just could go on your own and we could agree that that's what we do. And I said, well, I think that that's a very good choice for me. And so I took it. And so I had some months to actually, train myself in coaching and start coaching. And then afterwards, anyway, build that sort of financial plan and stability so I could support myself while I was building up my client base. And I mean, I'm still work in progress, right? I'm not, I'm not at the level of earning that I want to be in the future, or like stable, but it is the process, is the journey that I took, that's all. It's worth it, right? It makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people I work with do similar things. And I think what's important and what is like the takeaway of these, I guess, is to set yourself up for success, meaning be very much aware of what is that you need as a minimum requirement. And if you're someone that needs also to have mental space and a clear cut to be able to say, okay, now I focus on this and that's my new direction. Or if you're someone that can slowly build it on the side while you still work in maybe another job, and be honest with yourself to what is that, what works best for you and what are the options. Because sometimes we only see what is in front of us, but really there's so many other options that you may have not considered, of maybe new type of work or different ways of working, or even just asking your current employer for a plan or for a path. Like a lot of people are afraid to ask, rightfully so, I understand. But, sometimes there's more option than what you think. That's all.
What I find absolutely marvelous about your journey, as you said, is that you decided to take that plunge, and you decided to first, before taking that plunge of going independent, you actually explored options in your immediate context. You tried asking, what are my options for growth in this particular direction here and now? And then you decided to take, and it's really, there's no other word than being bold, finding the courage and the stamina of just going ahead and saying, hey, this is what I really want to pursue. I have reached a point of clarity that this is what I really want to do, and let's just actually do it, not overthink it, not just fantasize, not just say, I wish I could have, would have, should have. You have actually done it. And what I like about this, your situation, Valeria, is that, the journey is the destination. You may not have earned those XX dollars yet, but it's a matter of time. And this point in time, where you are in transition, this phase in life is where a lot of people want to be but are dreading it. You know, I don't want to leave the safety net of my paycheck, or I don't want to jeopardize the security for my children. Or maybe we'll have 2 vacations less, or eat out less, or whatever. There is so much of dread, and there's so much of anticipation, and this is truly a space of discomfort. Now, sometimes people never manage to come out of their comfortable spaces, and sometimes they are thrown into the darkness because a disruption happened that they didn't ask for. What do you tell your clients when they come like, look, I want this, but I don't know how to go through this jittery feeling? At a very basic, concrete level, how do we allow ourselves to pursue our dream?
Yeah, I think these are all very valid fears and concerns. First of all, I just want to say that because I think like there's no shame in actually, acknowledging that there are parts of your life that maybe the job that you have allowed you to have, right? So especially as you said at the very beginning, for us expats, it's like those first jobs, even maybe if they're not what we want to really do, they allowed us maybe to, again, provide for our family or to build a career, to gain some skills, to be able to go on trips and to earn money and to get that stability. And that's all good. I think that a lot of the people that I coach and they come to me is they don't allow themselves to dream bigger than that anymore, because it's like, but that's good enough and that's fine enough. and they don't allow themselves to really see a bigger picture or to see their future, the future version of themselves. So that is something, for example, that we start by doing often, is really trying to visualize, okay, if you were to be the person that you think you want to be, or like if you could choose any job and any type of work in the world, what would that be? What would that look like? Who are you with? How does your life look like? What does it feel like? What is that bring you? What does that allow you to do? Because I think a lot of the time it helps to start from a place of allowing ourselves to even, welcome that sensation, to welcome that feeling of, oh, this is a new type of success. It's my definition of success that is different than my definition of success that I had some years ago. And maybe, now I've achieved that, but that means that I can allow myself maybe to dream a little bit more, a little bit bigger. And from there, I have some people that said, oh, I actually, I would want to be a pilot or something. And I mean, okay, maybe, and it doesn't mean that now we have to work towards you becoming a pilot. That's not the point. The point is, what is it then about that lights you up? Again, that's why I'm all about, what lights you up? Like, what is it about that makes you wanna dream about it? What are the elements of that kind of work that make you feel more like you? What feels like home to you in that dream? And then we work towards it, and we work, of course, more practically afterwards, right? About what does it take to get there, and like what does need to happen, and how can you allow yourself to go there?
Yeah. And talking about fears again, what really helps people overcome that fear? If I continue thinking and dwelling on that happy space of, what brings me joy and what I would do if money was not a constraint, if visa was not a constraint, does that dwelling in that happy space enough to overcome the fear, or what does one do to overcome that fear?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And of course, that's why like a coaching, like when we coach, it's a process that we do over, it's a 3 months process when you work with me. But we of course dive deeper into the fear, because we need to understand what does that fear really mean, because sometimes it is a fake sense of stability that we are fearful of losing. But when we look deeper into it, it's then all of a sudden it's not as scary when we see that there are possibilities where we can take smaller steps that feel manageable, that don't feel too risky, but still feel like I'm moving forward, that we can take without everything to the ground, without just having to, say, oh, now I just throw everything that I've done in my career before. It's building on top. It's building from the ground up. It's something that we work with step by step. And I think that we can overcome fears by focusing on building up courage, because we will always have some fears. Fears are there. It's just natural. Our brain's way of protecting ourselves to the unknown, right? To things we don't know yet. So how do we work towards them to get to know them a little bit better, to do a little test, to do a little step, to even have the feeling of making that dream a little bit more concrete? I see that a lot of the time with my clients, that they're like, I really want this, but somehow it doesn't feel real. This career that I've had so far, it feels very real because I've done it and I know what that is about. But this new path, I can't seem to embrace it because it doesn't feel real. And I'm like, and that's when we say, what would that take for you to make it feel real? And then, more deeper we go. And then it's like, oh, maybe it's about trying this thing out, or immersing myself in the context, or talking to people. And then, all of a sudden it becomes, from a very, very big, scary thing, it becomes much, much more manageable and achievable and practical. And I think that's the key. And that's what we work on together.
Wonderful. Sounds great. Yes, I wish everyone a coach like yourself to help navigate, this scary moment and take something so big and so difficult and something so distant and get closer to it. And it's like really dipping your toes in the water if you're not a swimmer before you start swimming, long distance. Now, tell me again, going back to on the personal front, you have experienced two cultures and maybe more. Work-wise, what are the differences that you have noticed in the different cultures that you have lived in?
Yeah, so I have to say, like let's say my main work life has been in Denmark. So that's the main experience that I've had in my work life. I did have a few experiences, for example, in the US. I worked there for a few months in LA and then again in Canada. So,
and how about that?
And then, of course, I know yeah. And then, of course, I know about the Italian work culture from, of course, my friends and family and from growing up and seeing them. And I think I like the Danish way of really giving a lot of space of life into work. I have to say, very honest here, I am not a believer in work-life balance. I don't think that nowadays, with how much connected we are, and especially, again, our generation, the millennial generation, is completely possible to separate the two. So I'd rather like to say integration, work-life integration. And I think that Denmark is very good at that, meaning that, okay, you need to go pick up your kids, you do that, or you want to check your emails on a Sunday, okay, that's fine. Whereas I feel like other countries, especially in the southern, they're more strict still and a bit more backwards in terms of defining what that means. And you need to show up 9 to 5 and that's how you do. And of course, that doesn't apply to me anymore. And that's also part of the autonomy and flexibility that I love about doing this job, because I can actually work when I do work best. I can do my day as I work best. But I think that's one of the biggest differences. And also the type of course, in Italy, hierarchy is still very strong in terms of, levels in the companies. Whereas here, I feel like it's much more flat in terms of organization. Yeah.
And in having known of these differences, are there any challenges socially or professionally that you overcame as an expat? I mean, we've talked about the career transition, but anything that comes to mind where you thought, okay, this is tough, or I'm surprised that things work this way. Either way, the challenging or the pleasantly surprising stuff that you encountered in your past decade.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I mean, there are a lot of things, right? Because I think that is a very common experience for any expat coming from any place, and going into a different culture, that we experience just like a small everyday. It's not even about the way the work is organized. It's just the way that we show up with other people at work, or like how we behave, or like the interactions that we have to deal with. That is definitely something that I've experienced as well. I think one thing is that I'm naturally quite an open person. I've been always quite extroverted. So I like to just talk to people, like even that if I don't know them. And I remember that at the beginning, there was quite of a clash, at least not clash, but quite of a difference, with especially Danes, because I mean, in that sense, we're very different. They're much more reserved and not really maybe as outgoing. But I felt that instead of that being necessarily a difficulty, it was my advantage, because the fact that I didn't have a problem in approaching people, right, made it so that I could make friends even with locals, because I was the one initiating the contact. So I didn't I didn't let the, reserve part push me away. I actually just forced myself into, at least I like to say also to some of my friends, I was like, I literally forced myself into our friendship. Like, you had no choice but to be friends with me. And I mean, it's funny because even at the beginning, my husband was one of those people that I thought he was very, very serious and very reserved. But then, once I just started talking to him, I found that he's actually a very, very laid back person. So I'm happy that me being an international, and that's also why I always say to other internationals that I think it's very, there is a pressure, of course, and it is true that when we are in a different place and confronted to different set of cultural rules, we want to fit in. It's a natural response. We do want to make sure that we are part of it. But I think it's actually can be to our advantage that we have different ways of approaching things. And if we stick to them in an authentic way, of course, respectfully always. But I think that can also open up new relationships and new opportunities that it's exactly because we are ourselves that we get. And I think that that's something that I learned throughout, my work life here. And there has been also difficult moments where I've even been bullied for being from Italy, and I've received denigratory comments, and people even accuse me of being too friendly just because I was open. And so that can go both ways, right? But it's important that, you know the truth, you know who you are, you should definitely stand by it and use that to your advantage and say, okay, I am like this, I have this power, and that's how I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it to my advantage. So I think that is definitely coming from being different than maybe other locals or context. Yeah.
I know what you mean. Well, listening to you, the import of your journey, the big import for me is that you are someone who takes charge of her situation, both socially and professionally. You didn't leave things to just chance or to unfold as they are, or let things be. You take the initiative, you make things happen, you take intentional choices and are very, very concrete and intentional about your actions. And that's probably the reason why we see you as an example of someone who has been able to make some very tough and radical shifts in their professional career, and have also found a way to be stable in a wholly new country, being married to a person from that country. I think this was a wonderful, delightful conversation, Valeria. To whoever who has been watching us in this podcast, I would love to hear what you make of Valeria's experiences and how you have benefited from her suggestions. If this has touched you and your journey in any way, please do share by dropping a comment here underneath on YouTube. And of course, this wisdom from other expats is what is so valuable that we should not hesitate from sharing further with other friends and people in our network who can also benefit from the experiences of other migrants and internationals. I hope you will keep watching the Decoding Diaspora video podcast series. I will be back with many more interesting guests just like Valeria. Thank you so much for today, Valeria. I have truly treasured our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Surabhi. It was lovely to talk to you, and I feel like we could talk for hours. So thank you again for having me.
Indeed. Thank you, Valeria, and thank you to my viewers. I promise to be back again with a wonderful new guest. Till then, do take care. Bye-bye.